Yeah. Google Stadia, why did you die? I just pulled out this Google Stadia from my box here. Oh, it's so covered in dust. I haven't been playing too many video games of this thing. Google Stadia is still around? Is that true, Perrin? Why are we doing an episode about this thing?
Doing an episode about this thing because it died and nobody noticed. Also, yesterday, they closed their Stadia Games and Entertainment division, which was supposed to be the division that actually made, new gaming content for the device. That's not happening now. That's completely done. The device was arguably already dead. Is it completely kaput now? I mean, you've got one. You tell me.
Just look at this thing. I plugged it in the first time and I tried playing Destiny 2 on it in 4K, and it ended up being this buggy mess of a 1080p-like experience. It was total garbage. Gosh, Google Stadia died. Nobody noticed. And what does this mean for the streaming industry? I mean, this is a long pattern of Google of creating products and then just killing them off, right, Ross?
Yeah, and we're going to go through that after the commercial break. We're going to take a look at the Google graveyard. It's one of my favorite things we've ever done on this show.
This podcast is sponsored by Restream. Why live stream to one platform when you can simultaneously live stream to every platform to discover new audiences faster using Restream.io?
Google Plus, Google Video Player, Google Buzz, Google Answers, Google Wave are just some of the things that Google has killed. And it unfortunately looks like the Stadia is going to be joining that graveyard. Perrin, do you have that up on the screen? The Google graveyard. I love this. This is so amazing.
There is a lot of stuff on this list. I was like, I've never heard of some of these, like Google Daydream, YouTube Leanback.
YouTube Leanback? Hold on. What was that? YouTube Leanback? What the heck is that?
Killed over 1 year ago, YouTube Leanback was an optimized version of YouTube used for television, web browsers, and WebView application wrappers. It was about 9 years old. And it's dead.
Oh man, I can't believe YouTube Leanback didn't make it. That's so funny.
So adding to this list today, we're saying we're going to be adding Google Stadia to this list. But I want to know, guys, we're saying it died and no one noticed. Like, what killed it? What is this pathway of death? Why is the games division being closed? Why?
I think Google's the answer here. Am I wrong, AWOL? It's Google that messed this up and killed it. I don't see anybody at fault here but Google.
I agree. So, one thing I just dropped my Google Stadia. No, my gaming console.
Oh, no, you may have to get another one on eBay because they don't sell them anymore.
Oh, the book fell out. So, Google Stadia is a great excuse to get a free Chromecast Ultra. That's for sure. It really is dusty. I'm not just hamming it for the episode. But one of the reasons why this failed is that everybody, when they launched, wanted the Google Stadia to be the Netflix of games. What they dreamed of is a world of cloud gaming where you could play 4K games at super high graphics, a relatively low cost, but with a monthly subscription, and you could have the Netflix of games. So I don't think anybody had a problem necessarily with the streaming of games with Stadia. That concept everybody's cool with. We all know that's the future in some capacity. But what we did have a problem with is that not only did you have to buy this Chromecast Ultra and the controller, but you had to pay full price for every single game that came along with it. And once people found out that business model, I think that ultimately killed Stadia. And so the console, quote unquote, launched. It had Destiny 2, an ancient game on it. It then promised 4K gaming for people. It didn't deliver 4K for almost any of the games. It was an upscaled version of 4K. And then there weren't any original games on the system. They then made some moves to make some original games for Stadia, and then they closed that studio down. So long story short, where does that leave Google Stadia today? It's basically a third-rate cloud streaming service where you have to pay money to stream video games that you're paying full price for anyway. It just doesn't make any sense. Why? Because Xbox Game Pass has such a vastly superior offering than Google Stadia. Honestly, that's the big story here. We've seen what the Netflix of games looks like, and the Netflix of games is Xbox Game Pass. You pay one subscription, and then you can access an entire library of hundreds of games. That's what we wanted Stadia to be in the first place. That was the kind of dream and the sort of pitch that they sort of made to audiences. Play anywhere, anytime, play anything you want. It's so easy. They made it easy to stream games, but unfortunately, the games cost full price. So why the hell would you do it at all? To me, that's the fatal flaw there, is that they didn't have a library of games that came along with the subscription at launch, and so it couldn't entice the average customer to come in and see the value of the purchase. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, just think of it as a consumer, and we do this a lot, and I've been hit by this a lot. You buy digital movies, and then that service changes and you lose them. So because we've shifted over to this age where we're purchasing things that we think now we're going to own digitally, but like stuff happens and companies change and we don't end up getting to keep it. So many consumers have been jaded by this act of purchasing like a digital movie, and I think now into digital games, that unless we're actually like physically own that game or through a service that we know we have it in perpetuity, seemingly like Steam or something like that, then we're really, really hesitant to purchase movies or games because we know that company is going to go take it away somehow, or they're going to get bought out by some other company and we're going to lose it, right? And I think just not being able to feel like you own the digital project, it just feels like you're still renting it just for a much higher price for a longer time period, but it could go away randomly at any point. You know, I do think Xbox Game Pass, I think you're completely right, AWOL. They have found the new model, and you need to offer a lot for a subscription price, not just have the subscription price being the basic key to access, and then there's just everything else you would do from there needs to cost more money. It was just too expensive. And the idea was it was supposed to be more accessible. You could access and play games on all these other different devices. That should, if you're going to make games more accessible, they need to be cheaper, not more expensive. Ross, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Another point that I want to move down the list real quick and start talking about is actually just the marketing in general. It was really poor. Can you guys remember anything from the Google Stadia marketing? Because I surely can't, and that tells me that it was not very well done. And I think the reason behind that, AWOL, if you agree, is there's literally nothing to market here.
Yeah, well, they marketed the dream and the vision of cloud gaming. That was what they were actually marketing in all these pitches, right? The idea that you could, and I'll put the marketing on the screen here, there it is, play on devices you already have, right? That was part of the pitch. And that marketing is really interesting, right? You can play on your tablet, you can play on your PC, you can play on your laptop. It's the dream and the vision of cloud gaming. Everybody's in on that. That sounds cool. But what was missing with this is the games. And so that's the part that never was a part of their marketing. And as we've noticed from Xbox's marketing in the past and PlayStation's marketing, whenever they've done E3s, whenever they've done rollouts, where they focus on the hardware too much and they talk about how it's like a media machine in your living room, it'll play DVDs, and they focus on anything that's but the actual video games themselves that are going to be on the system, gamers don't respond and they don't go to market effectively. So unfortunately, Google Stadia made the same mistake that Xbox and PlayStation has made in the past so many times, and they stopped making those mistakes. Anytime you're going to roll out a new gaming platform, your marketing needs to be only about the games that are going to be on that platform. And they decided to launch this thing too fast. They thought that their tech was good enough, compelling enough, that everybody would want to jump on board. They thought that they were going to be early enough to the market in cloud gaming, use their superior Google technology, I guess, in order, like there's all these nodes they're talking about on the screen to get all these developers and publishers interested. Well, at the end of the day, hardware is useless. Is that Steve Jobs right there? Hardware is useless without software. And Steve Jobs has talked about this many, many times. You can create a revolutionary piece of hardware, but if you don't have a great marketplace that's compelling and you don't have great salespeople that can bring great content in there, I'm ripping this straight from Steve Jobs' interviews, then your hardware, it doesn't matter to the end user. They didn't think about the end user experience first. They only thought about the technology first. This is a famous quote from Steve Jobs. He talks about this all the time. Other companies, they have engineers, right? And the engineers think about, we have this cool technology. Now let's make a product out of it. Steve Jobs, he's such a genius because he thought about, what does the end user want? What's the experience that they want? Okay, now I'm going to develop a technology for the experience the end user wants. Google Stadia is the example of the wrong way to do it. They had a cool technology, cloud streaming for gaming, but they didn't think about the end user first. And what did the end user want? It's quite clear that the end user just wanted a Netflix of games. They just want to be able to pay a monthly subscription and get a whole bunch of games and be able to play it everywhere. And they
Wait, you're
missed the
telling me
most
they didn't
essential
want
piece of the
teraflops?
offering.
They didn't want 10.7 teraflops?
They wanted beautiful, big natural teraflops, Linux and Vulkan. Like, do you see all these like logos they're putting on the screen here? Gamers don't buy Vulkan. They don't buy Linux. They don't buy Unreal Engine. They buy games. They don't buy Unity. Where are the effing games? That was the mistake, Ross. You know what I'm saying, buddy? Back to you.
I do know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. But another reason that they didn't have a marketing strategy is because they didn't have anything original to market. There was literally no original content for the Stadia. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong here, but wasn't like one of the only games they launched with Assassin's Creed Odyssey?
Well, Doom Eternal they did. They did Doom Eternal.
Cool.
And one of the things about Doom Eternal is they promised it would be, in 4K. This was a part of the marketing pitch that we're watching right now. They still left this out there. They promised it would be in 4K, and it was in 4K, but it was an upscaled 4K. So it was like that digital upscaling or whatever the hell it's called. I forget the name of it. And so that's something that they promised that that this would be like kind of like a flagship game. And this was the game that was going to prove that the cloud-based technology was good enough to be able to handle like extremely responsive first-person shooter scenarios, right? I mean, if you can play Doom Eternal on this thing, this frenetic moment-to-moment shooter with tons of action, obviously you need high frame rate and everything for that game to be compelling, then the technology must be good. It was supposed to prove that, but they never got to relaunch it at 4K. They never met their own promise that all these big, beautiful, big natural teraflops you can hold in your hands, that those teraflops would actually come to your TV, that they would actually be flowing through your Chromecast, and you'd be able to play with your controller. Instead, you got a 1080p X upscaled version of it. And honestly, that was a huge marketing flop for them. And it was this, they overhyped and underdelivered for sure, Perrin. But I think furthermore, they kept talking about how good their technology was over and over again, and that was the big pitch that the Steve Jobs wannabe wanted to do. But at the end of the day, their technology wasn't that much better. It just wasn't. And so if you don't have the games, your tech has to be amazing. But their tech wasn't amazing either. It was mediocre at best. And at launch, it barely performed at all. I mean, I tried to play these games at launch, and I couldn't play Destiny 2 at all. A wired 400 megabytes down internet connection straight into my Chromecast Ultra. I was unable to play Destiny without having massive frame drops with my experience on Stadia. And I was plugging it into my computer. I mean, it was a total botch launch as well. Back to you, Ross. I'm just ripping this thing to bits. Back to you, Ross.
Yeah, well, not only did they not launch with original content, but they kept going without original content. Hey, well, how long has the Stadia been out? And I don't know why I just got so high-pitched and squeaky, but how long has the Stadia actually been out now? And is there any original content whatsoever for this thing?
They bought a couple, to my knowledge, indie games along the way. They bought, and so some indie games are on there for whatever that's worth. And as we know, indie games, I love you, indie game studios, but for the most part, indie games are indie because they're not that good. And they're not good enough to appeal to a lot of people, right? So they bought a few indie games and they threw them on there and they're like, original games. I received the emails from Google Stadia where they talk about the new games and the discounts. And for the most part, almost all of their offerings that they have are discounts on games for you to buy the Stadia version. I mean, how crazy do you have to be to buy the Google Stadia version of something? Like, you're basically saying like, you know what? I only want to play this game until the end of 2021 because this shit's going out of business. I mean, I think that's where we're headed right now with Stadia. Like, you're basically saying, I want to rent this game for maybe 6 months and then have all my money be thrown in the garbage. I mean, I think this thing's going out of business. What do you guys think?
I mean, it's not just Stadia. It looks like this is a whole wider industry trend, like this cloud gaming thing. I think you're going to see all the big tech abandon it. At least according to this article, which was written the day before, by James Batchelor here in GameIndustry.biz, saying that there are warning signs to a much lesser extent by the departure of Mark Whitten, formerly head of Amazon's own cloud gaming service Luna, just 5 months after the project launched. So like Luna was a competitor and they're like, oh, we're out. Like, this isn't going to work. We're out. And so the whole concept And every time anybody has tried to do this cloud gaming service, it has failed spectacularly, except for Xbox Game Pass. So any other iteration, it looks like even competitors who are going to come up versus Google Stadia, they're abandoning ship too. They can see the writing on the wall. I think you're going to see the whole movement, for the most part, die, and the innovation of this part die outside of it, at least for a while, because no one's going to want to touch this because it's just a money loss. It's just a money sink. You're going to lose money. Gamers, they're going to think that gamers clearly don't want this right now, which is sad because that's not true at all. I think gamers love the idea of this. These companies just they don't understand gamers very well. Google is not particularly good at targeting gamers specifically. And we know this because they didn't take the first fundamental lesson of making a game console that Sony and Microsoft would be able to tell you is you got to have the games. You got to have the games. If you don't have the games, you can't sell a console. So they messed up rule number one, and it sucks because this would have been cool. I think every gamer kind of wanted something like this, but implemented correctly. And so now Amazon's out, Google's out. I don't think anyone's going to touch this type of thing for years now.
Yeah, is it because the internet infrastructure, it's just not stable enough to support a cloud-only product like this?
I mean, that's part of it, I think. I think, to be able to stream 1080p games, you need a really, really reliable, low latency internet connection. A lot of people around the world don't have those. Even, in first world countries like United States, it's really hard to get a reliable downstream for games because a lot of people are on broadband internet, and you share the same pipe essentially with everybody in your neighborhood or in your area when you have broadband. And so that means that when everybody's downloading Netflix and using the internet and doing hot video streaming, you're sharing all of that bandwidth with people in your area. And with gaming, that doesn't work. I mean, with gaming, it works normally because when you're moving data around playing Fortnite or whatever, Call of Duty, normally the amount of data you have to move is relatively small. But if you have to also stream the video part of it and the audio part of it at the same time, it becomes like, running Netflix plus a video game plus at the same time, and it has to not stutter ever or buffer ever to have a good experience. This is unrealistic. It's just unrealistic. I mean, some internet connections can handle this. A niche amount of them can handle this. If you're looking at fiber, you can handle this. Maybe some DSL lines can handle this. And if you're lucky to have an independent, let's say audio or internet company like Parent has in your area, a small independent company, you can have reliable enough internet to be able to handle this. But otherwise, you're probably going to be running into internet issues and having nonstop problems. So the dream of cloud gaming being viable for 4K gaming, ridiculous. Of it being reliable for 2K gaming, ridiculous. 1080p, barely right now. We just don't have the internet infrastructure globally to be able to handle this. What are your thoughts, Perrin?
I mean, it's just too early. It just seems like this is kind of something that I thought when they first announced it. I was like, it's too early. It's just too early. The infrastructure, at least in the United States, and maybe most other places in the world, the internet infrastructure needs to be upgraded before we're ready to do 4K game streaming across, our internet connections. They're just not good enough. I mean, and the U.S. infrastructure is okay. It's better than some other places, but it needs to be upgraded for this type of thing too. The world, it was not ready for Stadia, despite us maybe wanting something like it. But I do think that was less of the issue. Even if we had the infrastructure in place, I think the biggest issue was the costs. I don't think there's ever a scenario, even through the future, where we're going to be okay with spending, owning all of our stuff digitally. You're still going to want to know that we permanently own this game somehow. And we don't want to have to pay a subscription to then also have to purchase movies and games after the fact. We're used to now the standard being paying subscription that gets us access to everything that platform has to offer, except for maybe in some cases some premium content, like what Disney Plus is doing, where they will premiere a brand new movie and you have to pay to watch that premiere while it's in the theaters. So you can pay more for earlier access to stuff, but all the other stuff should still be very, very available. And their monetization model was terrible. And I'm just going to go back to that because no matter everything else they did, yeah, that stuff could all come into play and be fixed, and this could be a thing in the future. But they would still fail in the future because of that one idea, that one concept.
Okay, let me ask you guys this question. If they did what their competition has done and included a hardware component in with the Stadia, how do you think it would have fared?
They did include a hardware component, but the hardware component I think we're referring to is if they had done like a little mini console or something that could actually play games offline or something.
Yes, that's
and
exactly.
if they had done that, that would have been an entirely different business model. And so would that have done well? Maybe. It's possible that they could have found a niche in the market. Instead of doing a Chromecast Ultra plus a controller, they could have done a mini console plus a controller. Or the thing is, they would have had to find somewhere in the market above or below PlayStation and Xbox. They couldn't have just entered the market exactly where those are. So they could have done an extreme enthusiast console, or they could have done a really light console. And I feel like Nintendo is always really good at the light console. So the only open space in the market would have been enthusiast console, of coming in with something that is like maybe $700, $800, but is more or less like a mid to high end PC, and coming into the market with that. Would that have been more successful than a Chromecast Ultra with a controller? Yes. Because they could have combined buying a game and being able to play it locally and having that option available if your internet isn't good enough. And then Stadia could have been an on-top service that they could have offered people on top of that hardware-based experience, just like what Xbox is doing. Xbox offers a wonderful service right now with Xbox Game Pass. Play on your hardware, but if you want to throw some games on your phone, which I've done, do it. If you want to throw some games on your laptop sometime, do it. It's all good. You can do that with Xbox Game Pass, but you always can go back to home base, playing on your PC, playing on your Xbox. So this solves, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, the issue of not having a good enough internet connection and cloud streaming not being ready from a technological and infrastructure standpoint, having that console there. So I think, yes, it would have been way more successful if they'd launched a console, but that's an entirely different idea. I think this is a case of them having too much ego, to be honest. Them thinking, we are Google, we have killer servers, we have great devs, and our tech is going to be so compelling it's going to crush the market, and the market was just not ready. This was 10 years too early, in my opinion. Perrin?
There's some additional stuff here that I didn't know. I just pulled up from a Kotaku article. We're talking about they made a big mistake by not getting the games, but it's not like Google didn't try really hard to get the games. In fact, they went through great efforts to get games and still failed. So in this report, they blew millions on Red Dead Redemption 2 and other ports. And reportedly from Ethan here on Kotaku, and this is back in late February, they tried to get indie developers on too, and they also failed to provide enough money to attract people to the versioning platform. This was also kind of exacerbated by them shutting the whole service down. Did you know about this, Awell? On February 1st, they shut the whole service down. They just suddenly shut the whole thing down to both subscribers and developers by surprise. Yeah. This is more or less a week after Stadia VP and General Manager Phil Harrison sent an email to the team congratulating them on great progress. So, like, Jesus. The internal culture, the strategies behind being able to support this platform were not good to begin with. So there was like actually a huge hurdle, Google jumping into this whole concept where Sony and Microsoft are very comfortable. They know this. They know what it takes to get game developers on board. They know how much money it takes. I think Google is new to this turf. They're very new to this territory. I think they underappreciated or underexpected how much money they would need to get game developers and good ones on board. They did get Redemption 2 there on release, but for millions and millions of dollars. So I think they overpaid for some, and then they didn't have enough money for other games. So just a matter of poor money management from that side. And at least according to this article, they're trying to move too fast and breaking things, at least from their opinion, from this author's opinion. And I would tend to agree with that. It seemed like Stadia launched, it was kind of a failure. It was missing features. And from that point, like it launched prematurely, and then everything else kind of had to happen prematurely to try to make up for the fact that Stadia never had what it was supposed to have to begin with. And that's what you call polishing a turd. Whenever you launch something that kind of is bad, and then you have to scramble to make it a little bit better, you're only making a bad thing a little bit better. That still means it's bad. So this whole thing, because of the failed launch, I think it was doomed from the start.
That totally makes sense, Ross.
Yeah, and I think another thing, Perrin, you really hit on this earlier, is they're legitimately asking you to pay full price for video games on the Stadia, and also
It's laughable. It's laughable.
It really is,
Yeah.
and also just to kind of dig into the point, like AWOL said, nobody wants a new console. People are now looking at the Netflix of games, and I understand why it was easier for Microsoft to go that route, because they've already built up an audience and built that trust with consumers. Google hasn't done that. So I don't know. It just feels like this was a situation where this had no shot to work from the beginning. In fact, I don't really recall anyone looking at a Stadia and saying, that's the future right there, Google Stadia.
I wanted it to be the future. I pre-ordered it pretty quick.
Everyone did. Yeah.
But I mean, I pre-ordered it. It was a huge waste of money. It's been sitting, I mean, you saw me choking on the dust from it earlier. It's been sitting in my closet this whole time. But I mean, I wanted it to be what they promised. I wanted to be able to fire up these games and to have it be great. I wanted to be able to plug this thing into my TV downstairs and just have it play games amazingly. I could go chill on the couch, use my phone, whatever. I wanted it to be what the marketing promised. We all wanted that. We all wanted that. But it just didn't deliver. And so this reminds me a lot of the early days of VR. We all want virtual reality to be great. We all want VR to be awesome. We all want that to be an extremely immersive experience. We want the games to be compelling on there. But just like with virtual reality, there's no good games. There's no good games on Stadia that are proprietary to Stadia. There's almost no good games that are proprietary to virtual reality other than Beat Saber, which is fucking great. And so without the games, new technologies cannot thrive. I think that's the theme here. I think that's the number one thing that killed Stadia. If you don't have the freaking games, nobody cares about your technology. Games first, technology second. Content first, platform second. This is the theme we keep saying over and over and over again in the age of the internet. Right, guys?
One more additional thing here. And Ross, I'm not sure what else is on our list we have to cover, but I didn't consider this one, COVID-19. And at least according, again, to the same source here on Kotaku, a hiring freeze went into effect once the COVID-19 pandemic started, making it hard to meaningfully move forward with production. I do imagine that hamstrung a lot of their efforts. And if they were already struggling, this probably would have killed it. Having a hiring freeze, not being able to bring any new talent. You got to remember, like, everybody working there knows about the negative stigma, the negative PR that the thing received when it launched. So you're already working on maybe lower morale, speculating here. But that hiring freeze and COVID-19.
That's not wild speculation. I mean, come on. I mean, everybody, when you work for a company, you read the headlines for your company. I mean, everybody does that.
Yeah, and you want your company to succeed, because if your company succeeds, it means what you're doing there is meaningful, and that means your life has value, your work has value. And if it all fails, it was all for nothing. It's gonna lower your morale as an employee or a worker there. And then, you continue to get setback after setback, and now a hiring freeze happens, and now there's a worldwide pandemic. At that point, I think you're like, okay, Stadia is not the life priority anymore. And I think the amount of devotion and care for that product went out the window right at that point. So now you're left with a team that pretty much cares nothing about it. It probably knows it's not going to be successful, and is just going to try to hold on to their jobs as long as they can, because now there's a hiring freeze. That is not the situation where you get great products and great services out of. That is one where everyone's just trying to keep the jobs and not die, which those are good goals too.
Yeah, and last on our list, just to kind of add on top of that, because obviously I think COVID played a huge role in everything gaming related, and we may not have seen that necessarily last year, but we're definitely seeing it this year. This is going to be a really lousy year for gaming, for the most part. But the launch of the Google Stadia had such negative PR, and Stadia literally never recovered from that. But the whole point of that is they never even attempted to recover from that, which I don't know. I don't even know how to criticize that when you do nothing for the negative PR
Right.
that you get.
No, I get it.
That's digging your own grave.
I mean, it's one of those cases of, like, we always talk about, if you get negative PR, do not respond. And they did that. And they never did anything with their platform.
Yeah.
Like, that's the crazy thing. Like, They never did like a secondary marketing blitz of like, okay, we're going to make these big moves and then we're going to roll out Stadia again and push it out to the public again. Instead, all they were able to do was like cut deals with Verizon to give away Stadias for free if you buy a phone, or cut deal like they had so many Stadias made, they couldn't give them away. They literally could not give away for free all of the Stadias they had. They still have them in boxes in a warehouse. They are not given away. That's how low the demand was for this product.
Oh my God.
So there's no coming back from that. Like if you can't give away your product for free and you get a free Google Chromecast Ultra with it, if you can't give away your product for free effectively and you're struggling to do that, that means you have a big doo-doo bomb of a stinker of a product, right?
Yeah, I have nothing else to add to that because it's
Demand was just never there. I mean,
it was too little, too late. Okay, let's.
It was the console nobody wanted, delivered in poorly, and it's gonna just die, and everybody's gonna be like, okay, and then you're just gonna have this controller be like, can I use this as a Bluetooth controller later on something else? Because otherwise, it's just a worthless piece of plastic.
Right. Okay. Let's end with this question. Is there a scenario in the future, or rather, is this just before its time? The whole cloud gaming thing, like in 10 years from now, would the Google Stadia have had a better chance of really working?
No, because Xbox will dominate the market at that point. They bought Bethesda. They have their own in-house studios. But Xbox is positioning themselves as the Netflix of games. So 10 years from now, Xbox will be the Netflix of games. And so anybody else that tries to come into the market at that point is going to be like the Quibi or all the other failed video services that try to make it. Like they're all going to be like little tiny ants that are a decade behind. So Xbox wins. I think that's it. Xbox wins. Game over. They win. GG. No read.
it's all about finding the right model for this type of business, and I think Xbox beat everybody to the punch, and they will hold the crown now for quite a while. It'll be hard to do any different type of model here. Clearly, this model didn't work. I don't think it would work in the future either. Xbox found what's going to work. Microsoft's got it locked in the bag now, and they're going to run with it.
They were under-resourced. Stadia was under-resourced. They needed like $100 million out the gate to just buy studios or to buy games and like to do something crazy. No, they needed like billions of dollars out the gate to get this thing kicked off to enter this market. And instead they had like just a tiny budget in comparison to their competitors. They had no chance. They literally have
to spend
ever.
money to create the demand because there isn't a demand for it. So they have to like spend billions of dollars, millions to billions to create the need for this product. And why it's at that point, it's like, wait, why don't we just create a product that actually has a need or a desire in the market instead of like having to spend tons of money to create it? At a high level business point, it begins to make like idiot sense at that point. So yeah, I would say at the end of it all, it is dead. We didn't even see it. Did we see it coming? Did we even know? If it isn't, it's dead now. There's going to be no original content, and it's not coming back out of its grave anytime soon. This nice little website that we showed you, it's going to be on here.
It's definitely going to be on there. Guys, speaking of things that are not dead, terrible segue, Restream's not dead. Our sponsor, they're quite alive. We are sponsored by Restream.io. We are streaming on Trovo, DLive, Periscope, YouTube, all the good platforms, including Twitch as well, all at the same time to grow our audience much faster. And we recommend that you guys do the same. We are not currently streaming, though, on Google Stadia because that's going to die. Restream is a great way to get your content out there as a gamer much faster and effectively. Send one signal to their servers. It goes everywhere. You're getting viewership everywhere. We've gotten comments on this episode, even one from a troll on DLive. Good to see you there. Thank you so much for watching the Digital Drop Podcast. We'll see you in the next one. Adios. And by the way, go try to get a free Stadia right now. Just take the Chromecast Ultra out of there and chuck the controller. You could probably get one for free. It's really easy. Adios.